Good morning. In yesterday's video, I had focused on the fact that scholars are unanimous that the Gospels are not a later fabrication. They're not a Constantinian invention. This is not a matter of scholarly debate. The fact is that the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all date between 40 and 70 AD, and John is the latest of the Gospels, but it was written by the 90s AD at the very latest. And in fact, regarding John, we actually have a fragment of an original that dates no later than 130 AD that was found significantly far away from Ephesus, where John was living when he wrote his gospel. So this is not a matter of scholarly debate. The Gospels date early. And today I wanted to focus on why this is so important for determining whether they are a reliable source of information about Jesus, the things that he did, the things that he said, and the things that are reported therein. There is the concept of living memory. So the fact is that if the Gospels date as early as 40 to 70 AD, we're talking about written sources of what Jesus did that date to the time of those that were actually around Jesus, that lived with him, that heard him say these things, that witnessed these events for themselves. In fact, of the Gospels, Matthew and John were both apostles. They were there. They're writing about themselves. When John writes of the beloved disciple, most scholars agree that he's speaking of himself there when he speaks of Mary and the beloved disciple beneath the foot of the cross as Jesus is crucified. He's writing from something that he himself witnessed, that he's writing with reference to himself. Now, why is this so important? If what is reported in the Gospels was not right, somebody would have objected, right? So one of the standards, the gold standards for whether a source is historically reliable is it written soon enough to the events that it could have been corrected, that it would have been objected to if in fact it were wrong. So this is very important as a gold standard for determining that the Gospels are a reliable source of historical information. Since I have time, I wanted to move on to another point of importance for the Gospel's historical reliability, and that is the fact that the events that they describe about Jesus are independently corroborated. That is, there are other sources that reference Jesus. He really was a historical figure, and he really did make a splash. There is a Jewish historian, a Roman historian of Jewish religion, named Josephus, who writes extensively, actually, of Jesus. He writes of his life, who he was. He writes of him as a miracle worker, and he writes of his crucifixion. Now, what does this mean? It means that Jesus wasn't, well, first of all, that Jesus really did exist. And then secondly, the big deal that the Gospels make of Jesus, that he was a miracle worker, that he attracted attention, this is verified by other sources outside the Gospels. So these are not fables. They're not stories made up later. Jesus really is a historical figure. Another historian besides Josephus that I think is particularly important is the pagan Roman historian by the name of Tacitus. And he affirms that there are Christians in Rome who were being persecuted by the Emperor Nero. He's writing after the 60s AD. And what's interesting about Tacitus is he doesn't just write about the fact that Jesus existed historically, but he confirms that the Christians actually held the beliefs. They actually believed that Jesus was present in the Eucharist. He writes that they claimed to eat the flesh and drink the blood of a certain Christus. He calls him Christus. This is remarkable because not only did Jesus exist, but the early Christians believed the radical teachings that are present in the Gospels. I'll continue tomorrow. Those are my 5 minutes for today. God bless.